Ethan is lucky to have such a humble father.
Simplicity is good, Back, if one knows how to appreciate it.
You should stay home. We'll live stream the wedding for you. That way, it's more comfortable.
What are you afraid of? Having your image tarnished?
Don't worry, he's just like a lovely old tree.
You have just proven that dignity is not in your legs, but in your heart.
Part 1. Wedding invitations and the first look of contempt. Venice Beach, a sunny morning. I was sitting in my small apartment overlooking the ocean when there was a knock on the door. The mailman smiled. "Mr. Reed, there's a letter for you. It looks like a wedding invitation." A white card, a silver bow, the scent of expensive perfume. I shivered slightly when I read the words, "Ethan and Sabrina, save the date." My son's name, embossed, right next to the name of a woman I'd never met. After 3 years of living like a ghost since Maggie's death, that card was the jolt I needed to come back to the real world. I thought, maybe this could be a new beginning. For him, for me. I called Ethan right away. His voice was full of excitement, like a child's. "Dad, I wish Mom was alive to see this. Sabrina, she's amazing. I want you to meet her this weekend. Dinner in Santa Monica?" I agreed. My heart felt a little warmer. Maybe finally, someone made Ethan smile genuinely again. Saturday night. I drove my old 2012 Chevy to the beach restaurant. Yellow lights streamed through the glass. The smell of steak and red wine mixed with the sound of distant waves. Ethan was there. White shirt, proud eyes. Next to him sat Sabrina. Wavy brown hair, lips as red as expensive lipstick, and eyes that stared straight ahead, sharp as thin blades. "Dad, this is Sabrina Cole. Sabrina, this is my father, Jonathan Reed." With pleasure, I held out my hand. She shook it, her smile perfect. But her gaze swept over me, quick, cold, and just a little appraising. "Oh, I didn't think Ethan's dad was that young." "I'm old," I said softly, "but I still know the difference between a compliment and a surprise." "A nice surprise," she laughed, pouring her drink as if she were on stage. I didn't drink. I just watched the way she spoke, the way she controlled the air around the table, as if the evening belonged to her. The food arrived. Steak seared, wine glinting in the candlelight. Sabrina sat cross-legged, laughing, talking about the new condo in Santa Barbara, the upcoming medical gala, their industry-famous friends. Ethan smiled, nodded, looked at me hopefully. "Do you think she's great?" I nodded, though a small voice whispered, "No." "Mr. Reed, I heard you used to work in film." "Yeah, mechanical effects. It was fun." "Oh, that was fun. Art. But you're retired now, right?" "Retired. Enough." "So life must be simple?" The sentence was light, but her tone hid a smile at the corners of her lips. A cold and contemptuous thing, wrapped in politeness. Ethan frowned slightly. "Sabrina." "I was just asking," she said, still smiling brightly. I put down the knife, trying to keep my voice even. Simplicity is a good thing, if you know how to appreciate it. "Yes, but sometimes people need more than that, to build a future. The future doesn't need so much money as it needs kindness." "Of course I agree." She smiled wryly, then turned away. Her eyes had cooled. I looked at my son. his innocent face still believing everyone is good. He didn't see what I saw in that girl's eyes. Not love, but comparison. As we left, Sabrina shook my hand again. This time she looked down, the light catching her diamond earrings. Ethan is lucky to have a father as humble as you. Modesty. The word fell like acid. I smiled, nodded, turned away. A cold ocean breeze swept across the sand as I walked out to the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw her lean in and whisper something to Ethan. He laughed, leaned down, kissed her forehead. I couldn't hear the words, but her lips moved slightly. We will make him proud. But I knew that sentence wasn't a promise. It was a perfect lie. That night, I went home, opened the window, looked out at the sea. In the darkness, Maggie's reflection flickered in the glass. Her eyes seemed to ask, "Are you okay?" I lit a cigarette, something I hadn't done in 3 years. The smoke mingled with the sound of the waves. "No, honey," I whispered. "I might be about to see our son marry the wrong person." The wind picked up, blowing the wedding invitation to the floor. I picked it up, looked at the silver words, "Forever starts here." I laughed, a dry, hollow sound, colder than the night wind. "Forever?" I muttered. "If that's forever, then let's see how long her forever lasts when the truth begins to be tested." And in the dim light of the desk lamp, I opened my old notebook and wrote 3 words. The test begins. That evening in Santa Monica, I thought the story had ended with that contemptuous look across the dinner table. But no. That was only the calm before the quiet storm, the kind that doesn't roar. It just waits. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice careful, too careful. "Dad, Sabrina wants to invite you to dinner, kind of a pre-engagement dinner." I hesitated. Every instinct told me this wasn't about celebration. It was about presentation. But I said yes. Because a father doesn't miss his son's milestones, even when he suspects he's being written out of them. The restaurant sat on the top floor of a seaside hotel, floor-to-ceiling glass, chandeliers like frozen tears, the ocean murmuring below. Sabrina was already there, radiant and poised, the kind of beauty that comes with calculation. She smiled as if she'd practiced it. "Mr. Grant," she said softly, "you should order steamed fish. It's easy to digest. At your age, you have to be careful." Then, lifting her glass of wine, red as a warning, she added, "Let us take care of the wine. It's Italian, a bit strong for beginners." I met her eyes. "I can handle it." "Oh." She tilted her head, smile unshaken. "Then I suppose you're used to cheaper ones?" Ethan shifted in his seat. "Sabrina." She turned to him, gentle, flawless. "I'm just caring for your father." Caring. That word stung more than any insult, because in her voice, care didn't mean concern. It meant control. The rest of the dinner was a symphony of forks scraping porcelain and words that sounded like silk but cut like glass. She talked about their future plans, joint investments, vacations abroad, modern family values, a future I wasn't invited to. I smiled when needed, nodded when required, and left feeling like a relic, a man too outdated to belong in his own son's story. A month later came Ethan's birthday. Sabrina was hosting at a luxury resort on the cliffs of Malibu. When I arrived, the long banquet table glittered under golden light. She greeted me with a voice sweet as syrup. "Uncle, your seat is over there." She pointed, not to the main table, but to a small one in the corner. The kids' table. 4 children with frosting on their fingers and video games blaring. She smiled. "It'll be fun." The humiliation was surgical, quiet, polite, deliberate. I sat there, hands folded, listening to laughter from across the room. Ethan raised his glass. His eyes met mine, a flash of guilt. Then he looked away. He knew. But love blinds even the wise, and Ethan had his mother's heart. Too soft for confrontation. Too kind to see the poison dressed as grace beside him. I stayed until the cake was cut, then slipped out before they noticed. On my way home, I drove past the coast, the moonlight glinting off the waves, mocking in its calm. There are 2 kinds of pain, the one that burns and the one that freezes. That night, mine froze. Weeks later, they moved into a new apartment in Santa Barbara. Ethan wanted me to see it. The place was beautiful. White walls, open light, the kind of home that breathes ambition. Sabrina folded her arms when I walked in, her perfume sharp as a warning. "This is a young people's area," she said lightly. "You might feel out of place." Her tone was sugar and glass, sweet, but if you touched it, you'd bleed. Ethan smiled weakly. "Dad, Sabrina's just worried you'll feel lonely." "It's fine," I said, looking at her. "You're right. I'm old. I don't need to keep up with trends." She smiled, satisfied. "At least you know that." The words were soft, but they slammed shut like the last door of respect. Clank. That sound stayed with me all the way home, like a chain around my chest. That night, I sat by the window of my small house in Venice. The cigarette smoke drifted upward, curling into the dark. Outside, the sea was restless. Inside, I was too. I realized something simple, brutal, and true. I had been erased, not by cruelty, but by indifference. Not screamed out of my son's life, just quietly deleted. No arguments, no goodbye. Just the polite extinction of a father's place. And then, from somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache, the salt, and the silence, came another voice. Maggie's voice. My late wife. The one who always saw through pride and pain. "John," she whispered, in that patient tone of hers. "When someone looks down on people, teach them the worth of a heart." I smiled, bitterly at first, then with purpose. The ocean outside turned black, infinite. I could almost see my reflection in it. Old, yes, but not finished. "If she thinks I'm a burden," I murmured, "then let's show her what a burden can become." Because some storms don't come from the sky. They rise quietly, from the soul of a man who's been dismissed for too long. And that night, the plan began. Not for revenge, but for revelation. To make her see what she'd buried under her own arrogance. That the ones she looked down on were the very ones who held the power to decide her fate. There are humiliations that fade, and then there are the ones that plant a seed. Mine had just begun to grow. Question for the audience. If it were you, and your child's lover looked at you with that same polite cruelty, would you stay silent for your child's peace? Stand up and fight for your dignity, or do something else entirely? Comment below. I want to know what your heart would choose. After the birthday party, I thought I had endured enough contempt to stop the pain. But sometimes, the real pain doesn't come from words. It comes from a voice, too sweet to be poisonous. That morning, the wind blew in from the ocean, cold and sharp. I was polishing a picture frame of Maggie, my wife, when the phone rang. The name appeared on the screen, Sabrina. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. Hello, Mrs. Reed. Her voice was silky smooth, so sweet it made me wary. Sabrina, what's up? Nothing serious. I just wanted to talk about tomorrow. I smiled, relieved. Oh, the wedding. Dad's all ready. Yes, she paused. That's why I called. Silence. I could hear the wind through the phone and her breathing, even, slow, cold. Uncle, she continued, the ceremony will be crowded. The press, my friends, Ethan's boss. I'm afraid you'll be tired. How about you stay home? We'll live stream the whole thing. You'll still be able to watch, and it'll be more comfortable. More comfortable. Those two words felt like a cold slap. I kept quiet, letting her think I was considering. Sabrina, I asked softly, what are you afraid of? I was just thinking about you. No, I smiled. You're afraid of your image being smudged, right? Silence again. Her voice dropped, smooth as oil. I just want everything to be perfect. You know, everyone will look. Everyone will talk. You might attract unwanted attention. Because I'm poor? Or because I'm old? Don't get me wrong. I just want to protect Ethan's honor. The words honor Ethan made me look up at Maggie's portrait. I saw her eyes, calm, gentle, but deep, as if asking, when are you going to let others trample on you like that? I said softly. Sabrina, maybe I should worry about my own reputation first. She laughed, harsh, cutting. Uncle, I don't want to raise my voice, but I think at your age, you should know your limits. The wedding is ours. Just watch the live stream. That's enough. Each word, each sound, was like needles piercing my skin. I could hear her breathing, even confident, as if she had just done a humanitarian deed. Are you afraid people will pity me? No, I'm afraid people will pity Ethan. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not pride, but something deeper, more insidious. Pity disguised as concern. I put the phone down, without turning it off. Her voice was still echoing. I just want everyone to remember the perfect day, you know, right? I didn't reply. I looked at the old wedding photo, Maggie and me. Two young, poor people, but eyes brighter than any diamond. I saw myself in it, the man who had promised to protect his son from all pain. Now I am a shame in my child's eyes. No, in her eyes. When Sabrina hung up, I sat there, fists clenched until they turned white. All the humiliation I had felt before came flooding back. Not shame, but realization. I stood up, walked to the old wooden cabinet, and pulled out the black iron box, where I kept the drawings, machine models, and equipment from my time at Vega FX Studio. My hands were shaking, not from weakness, but because my blood was starting to heat up again. On the table, Maggie's portrait smiled silently. I looked into her eyes and whispered, "If they want to see me weak, I'll show them the strongest thing a human has, the truth." I took the pen, opened the leather notebook, and wrote on the first line, Phase 1, Test. The wind from the sea blew stronger, carrying with it the smell of salt and storm. The room was suddenly lit by the blood-red light of dawn. And so, the plan began. If you were Jonathan, hearing your future daughter-in-law say, "Stay home to avoid embarrassment," what would you do? Hold back so your child won't be hurt? B, face her head on and tell her the limit? Or C, stay silent, but prepare a counterattack that will make the whole world speechless? I choose C. What about you? After that cold phone call, I no longer felt fear or sadness. The only emotion left was emptiness. But within that emptiness, a fire was smoldering. I understood. It was time for me to stop being the reasonable father and become the man they didn't expect. 3 days later, I drove to Burbank. 10 years ago, my name was engraved on the sign, Vega FX Studio. That day, Calvin Vega and I, my best friend, my collaborator, created effects so real, the audience believed the dead could come back to life, and that machines could cry. Now I was back, not to make a movie, but to deliver justice. Calvin looked at me in shock as I entered the workshop, the wind whipping through thick layers of dust. "John, holy shit, you look like you haven't slept in a week. What's up?" I sneered. "A performance. I need you to help me with the hardest role of my life." "What is it this time? A monster? An alien?" "No, a cripple." Calvin frowned. "John, what are you talking about?" "I need a wheelchair, a breathing tube, shaky hands, a blank look in my eyes. And it has to be real, down to every breath. I want people to believe I am not myself." Calvin was silent for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" "Not revenge," I said softly. "It's a test." "Testing who?" "The person who's about to ruin my son's life." The workshop lit up. The sound of cutting machines, the smell of hot iron and silicone. We began to build. A $12,000 electric wheelchair, lightweight alloy frame, micro camera installed in the armrest, a fake oxygen tank, soft breathing tube, adjustable vibration like the real thing, hand tremors, implanted under synthetic leather gloves to create a sense of lost control, and special glycerin, droplets to mimic saliva at the corners of the mouth. I checked every detail, not a single mistake, because one crack in this portrayal, and the whole truth would collapse. That night, Calvin dragged me to the mirror. The person staring back was no longer me. My hair, messy, my lips, pale, my eyes, sunken, my hands, twitching like a cut wire, a perfect cripple. So perfect. Even I was horrified. Calvin looked at me and said softly, "John, you know, not everyone is cold enough to use their own shame as a mask." I smiled, my voice hoarse. "But she's cold enough to turn others into shame." I'm just returning the lesson she taught. I tried moving the wheelchair, hands shaking, breath ragged. Everything was so fluid. It felt real. Every time I looked into the mirror, I heard Sabrina's voice echoing, "You should stay home. You'll be more comfortable." I smiled, a crooked smile. Comfortable? Thank you, Sabrina. You gave me the best role of my life. When the lights went out, I sat in the dark, listening to the servos humming like a heartbeat. Calvin asked softly, "Where do you plan to show up?" "At my son's wedding, in front of 200 people, and I'll show her that there are some mistakes that can't be erased," with an apology. Calvin looked at me, fear and admiration in his eyes. "John, if she knows you're filming, then everyone will know. Her truth deserves to be seen." I stood up, took off the gloves, looked at my real hands, still strong, still powerful. The same hands that once created miracles in cinema would now create a lesson about humanity. I walked out of the factory at dawn. The light hit the rearview mirror, reflecting off my artificially aged face. I looked like I had just risen from rubble, an old soul in a new body. Maggie's voice echoed in my mind. "John, are you going too far?" I whispered back, "No, honey. I'm just going far enough to bring justice to my side." As the car turned off the highway, the sunlight hit my eyes, making the fake glass shimmer like the real thing. I said softly, no one knew that behind those blurry eyes were $48 million and a pending verdict. If you had the chance to use your own intelligence to test the one who humiliated you, would you do it? 1. Forgive and forget. 2. Stand up and prove you're not weak. Or 3. Secretly prepare a mask to make them reveal their true nature. I chose 3. What about you? After weeks of practice, I had transformed into someone else, a frail form that I almost believed was real. But no matter how thick the mask, that day, the humiliation pierced through the silicone and straight into my heart. A sunny Santa Barbara afternoon, the Hotel Avalon ballroom was filled with white flowers and crystal. 200 guests, designer dresses, fake smiles, soft music, boisterous laughter, the scent of expensive perfume in the air. And in the midst of all the glamour, I was just a shadow in a wheelchair. The young coordinator, Emily, led me through a side entrance. Her voice was gentle. "Mr. Reed, the bride said your place is behind that pillar. It's quieter and more comfortable." More comfortable. The phrase came back like a knife, sharpening an old wound. I just nodded, mouth trembling slightly, in character. The girl had prepared a space between 2 tables, completely separated from the center. From that position, I could see everything, but no one could see me. Then, the wedding bell rang. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our beautiful bride, Sabrina Cole." Applause exploded like fireworks. Sabrina appeared, resplendent in a white gown, covered in silver, her face shining like an angel's. But only I knew. That angel had wings of cold steel. She walked between the rows of chairs, flowers in her hand, her lips curved just enough for the camera. And then, that look, she saw me, behind the pillar, snorkel peeking out, hands shaking. a drop of artificial saliva glinting under the light. For a second, her face darkened. Anger flashed like lightning. Then she smiled and kept walking. I understood. That smile said, "I told you not to come, and now you'll regret showing up." The ceremony went smoothly. Music, vows, tears, perfectly performed. When Ethan said, "I promise to love you in sickness and in pain," I couldn't help but chuckle. In sickness and in pain? If he knew that the woman beside him saw illness as shame, would he still dare say that? Chavshu. The party began. Lights glowed golden, glasses sparkled. Sabrina stood, microphone in hand, her smile silencing the entire room. "Thank you, everyone, for coming. Today is the best day of my life." Applause. Then she lowered her voice, soft as silk. "Before we start, I want to share something personal. Many of you must have seen Ethan's father today." A soft light fell, right where I sat. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me. It was like being placed on an operating table. I kept my head low. My prosthetic hand trembled. Steady, deliberate. "He's been going through a rough time," she continued. "Sometimes he acts a little different. But don't worry, he's not very aware of things anymore." Soft chuckles. A few pitying sighs. Sabrina tilted her head, pretending to care. "We always try to look after you. It's meaningful that you came today." Applause again. A perfect humanitarian act, where I, the disabled father, became nothing more than her prop. I wanted to stand, to scream, but I didn't. Calvin once said, "A stab is only worth it when the other person believes you can't stab." So I stayed silent, watching her raise her glass, her lips curling. "And if he acts strange, don't worry. Everyone has moments when they lose control, right? After all, he looks like a cute little tree." Bang! A wine glass hit the floor. The hall froze. Her words echoed through the speakers. The microphone was still on. 200 faces, some frozen, some looking at each other in disbelief. Ethan's face turned pale. Sabrina blinked, realizing the fatal slip. "Oh, I was just kidding. I mean, he's as resilient as a tree." But it was too late. No one laughed. No one believed. Only the background music continued, softly mocking the fate she'd just written for herself. I lifted my head. Every eye was on me. The breathing tube trembled. Hands shook. Artificial tears rolled down. But inside, a fire was burning. When the whole room laughs, I thought, I will stand, not because I want to, but because I have to. Because there are silences that, if prolonged even for 1 second, become complicity. If you were Jonathan, sitting there, listening to people insult you in the middle of your son's wedding, what would you do? Would you stand up and say everything? Stay silent and wait for the right moment to make them regret? Or leave with honor and let the storm find them later? I know my choice. Number 2, wait and make them regret it. The air was thick after the lovely tree remark. No one laughed anymore. Only the crackle of the microphone and the sound of wine dripping onto the floor. The chandeliers reflected Sabrina's pale face, the woman who had just written her own sentence. I still sat there. The oxygen tube still breathed evenly. My hands still trembled. But in my heart, humiliation had turned to steel. Ethan turned, ready to walk toward me. I shook my head. Not now. I couldn't let pity ruin the final truth. A guest whispered. He probably didn't hear clearly. How pitiful. Pitiful. Those two words were the bullet that hit the fuse. I took a deep breath, then reached down and turned off the servo switch. The whirring stopped. The room went still. I slowly removed the oxygen tube from my nose, untangling the wires around my wrists. A dry click, small, but in that silence, it sounded like thunder. Every eye turned to me. I placed the breathing tube on the table, gripped the armrest of the wheelchair, and stood up. The chair screeched softly, followed by a collective gasp from the entire hall. Sabrina stepped back. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Ethan stood frozen. And me, for the first time in years, I stood up straight before the world. Sorry, I said, my voice low and clear, for disturbing your party. No one answered. The music stopped. Time froze. I looked at Sabrina, smiled faintly. But today, I want to thank the bride, because you helped me prove one thing, that dignity is not in the feet, but in the heart. A few snaps echoed, guests raising their phones. The air began to change. The winds of justice started to blow. I pressed the small remote hidden in my sleeve. The big screen behind the stage lit up. The video played. Her own words, cruel and unfiltered. You should stay home, it's not embarrassing. This area's for young people. You'll feel out of place. Pitch first. He looks like a withered tree. Her voice echoed through the ballroom, sharp and naked. Each word, a stab that now turned against her. Sabrina turned pale. This is fake. What is he playing at? Truth, I said. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the screen. The bank interface appeared. Reed Holdings. $48 million. I spoke, calm and resonant. I promised my wife, Maggie, that money wouldn't fix mistakes, but it could expose who made them. Today, I'm donating $8 million to 4 disability rights organizations. On the screen, 8,000 USD, completed. The hall was silent, stunned. I continued. The remaining 40 million, I leave to my son. If he has the courage to walk away from the darkness and choose what's right. I looked at Ethan. He stood there, tears filling his eyes. Sabrina grabbed his hand. Ethan, listen. He's lying. He's trying to divide us. I laughed softly. No, Sabrina. I'm showing you that fame can't hide a dark heart. I stepped closer, voice low, calm. You said I wasn't classy enough to attend this wedding, but today, you turned this wedding into a trial. And the verdict? You just announced it yourself. Guests murmured. A few nodded quietly. Others rose and walked out. The ballroom was filled with whispers and the sound of cameras clicking. I placed the microphone gently on the table, bowed my head, and said, Justice doesn't always need a court. Sometimes, it just needs a stand-up. I turned, and walked straight toward the door, leaving behind the chaos of a wedding that had become a storm. Sabrina collapsed to the floor, her white dress now covered in dust, the smile gone. Ethan stood in silence, surrounded by whispers. She called your father a bastard? Oh my God, that was horrible. I didn't turn back, because this time, I didn't just stand on my feet. I stood with the dignity of everyone who's ever been called useless. If you witnessed that moment, the father standing tall, exposing the truth at his son's wedding, what would you do, eh? Stop him to save face? B. Stand up and applaud him for daring to speak for millions of despised souls? C. Or stay silent, knowing deep down you just witnessed a stand-up that changed someone's life? I know my choice. B. Stand up and let the world remember that silence is never justice. After I left the Hotel Avalon ballroom, the noise still followed me, like a wave that refused to dissipate. The door closed behind me, and I knew one life had just collapsed, and another had just been born. That night, Santa Barbara did not sleep. The clip, the bride calls her father-in-law a dead tree, went viral in just a few hours. People shared, commented, added background music, hashtags. Hashtag the standing. Father, hashtag human dignity, justice at the wedding. The next morning, TV news started. A video that shocked America. The bride insulted her disabled father-in-law, not knowing that he was a secret millionaire. Social media exploded. People who had worked with Sabrina messaged me, now we see her true colors. Ethan remained silent. 3 days later, the hospital where Sabrina worked announced that she was temporarily suspended to serve the investigation of unethical behavior. Her friends quietly deleted their wedding photos. Brands refused to cooperate. The image of the perfect bride disappeared faster than a mouse click. As for me, I wasn't gloating. I sat alone by the window, looking at the sea, listening to the waves crashing on the shore. What I felt wasn't victory, but a long, empty silence. Justice is never sweet. It is only true and cold. 87 days after the wedding, a hazy Los Angeles afternoon. My front door opens, and there stands Ethan, skinny, eyes dark, holding a piece of paper. Dad, have you decided? I asked. Yes. His voice was hoarse. I signed it. I didn't need to look at the paper to know what it was. Divorce. The end of 87 days of a nightmare. He sat down in the chair, head bowed. Dad, I'm sorry. I thought love could change people, but maybe only the truth can. I put my hand on his shoulder gently, like Maggie used to do to me when I fell down. You didn't choose money. You chose what was right. That's enough. He raised his head, his eyes red. Dad, don't you hate her? Hate her? I looked away. No, she only harmed herself. The most hateful person is someone who knows he's wrong, but still keeps quiet. Ethan nodded. For the first time in months, he smiled, tired, but genuine. A few days later, the news broke. Sabrina Cole had lost her job and her medical license due to unethical behavior in a medical setting. She disappeared from social media. Someone said she was seen in Phoenix, hair cut short, eyes vacant. I didn't look. I didn't care. Justice came before I could complain, and justice sometimes has the face of consequences. A month later, Ethan and I were sitting on the beach, where Maggie used to love watching the sunset. The wind was blowing, the waves were white. Ethan asked softly, "Dad, some people say you are cruel." I smiled, still looking at the sea. "No, son, they called it wrong. Cruelty is when you destroy others to vent your anger, but you only give them back the image they sowed." I was silent for a moment, then said softly, "Some people call me cruel. I call it fair." In the distance, the sun was setting, dyeing the horizon red. Ethan stood up and said quietly, "I will start again. But this time, I will choose with my heart, not with the eyes of others." I looked at him, seeing Maggie's silhouette smiling somewhere in the wind. Question for the audience. If you were Jonathan, knowing your son loved the wrong person, what would you do? Option 1. Let him stumble and learn his lesson. Option 2. Expose the truth, even though you know it will hurt him. Option 3. Stay silent. Let time teach him. I choose number 2, because there is pain that needs to come for people to wake up. And you, which way will you choose? 3 months had passed since that wedding, the day love burned itself to ashes and truth rose from the flames. People say time heals everything, but I've learned something else. Time doesn't erase what happened. It only brushes the dust off a man's dignity, revealing what's underneath. That morning, the California sunlight poured down like honey. I sat in my usual corner of the Laurel Diner, a quiet little place that smelled of coffee, buttered toast, and second chances. Through the window, Santa Monica Boulevard stretched endlessly, cars humming by, laughter spilling from the sidewalk. A new day, a new life. The bell over the door jingled. When I looked up, Ethan was there. He looked different now, lighter somehow, as if he'd left his guilt behind in another lifetime. And next to him stood a woman, soft brown eyes, hair tied loosely behind her neck, a calm voice that carried no judgment. "Dad," Ethan said, smiling for the first time in months. "This is Dr. Sarah Martinez. She's special." She reached out her hand. "Mr. Reed," she said gently, "I've followed your foundation's work. Thank you for reminding people that compassion is not charity, it's respect." Her handshake was warm, not the kind people give out of pity, but the kind that says, "I see you." And in that moment, I knew. This woman was different. She didn't come from wealth. Her beauty wasn't in what she wore, but in how she spoke, how she listened. It was the kind of beauty Maggie used to carry. Quiet, kind, unshakable. We sat down for breakfast. Ethan told me Sarah worked with children who had lost their ability to walk after accidents. She helped them stand again, not just with braces and therapy, but with hope. I listened, my heart tightening. Because for years, my son had chased perfection, but now, he'd found goodness. Between bites of pancakes and laughter that felt new again, Sarah turned to me and asked, "Do you ever regret what you did that day, at the wedding?" I looked out the window. Sunlight glimmered on the glass, turning my reflection into something almost unfamiliar. And with a slow breath, I said, "Rate slow pitch first. No, because that day, I didn't just stand up for myself. I stood up for everyone who was ever told they were less than human because they couldn't stand. She nodded, eyes soft. And I saw in her gaze something rare, understanding, no judgment, no fear, only truth. That afternoon, Ethan drove her home first. I stayed behind, alone, watching the street sink into golden light. The waitress brought me a refill, and I smiled, because for once the silence didn't hurt. Through the window, a boy passed by in a wheelchair. His nurse pushed him slowly across the sidewalk. Something in me stirred. I stood up, walked out, and stopped beside him. "Hey," I said softly, "do you like standing up?" The boy smiled, that brave, childlike smile that defies pain. "I'm practicing," he said. "One day, I'll be able to stand." I knelt a little, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, "That's good. Because sometimes when one person dares to stand up, the whole world has to look back." He laughed, and for a fleeting second, I saw myself in him. Not the man I became, but the man Maggie believed I could be. Later that evening, I opened my old notebook, the one Maggie had given me on our 10th anniversary. On its first page, she'd written, "One day, your strength will be louder than your pain." I took a pen and wrote beneath it, "Money can buy a perfect wedding, but it will never buy a good heart." When I closed the notebook, the last rays of the sun touched my hands, turning the scars on my skin into gold. And I realized everything I'd lost had only led me here. Now I travel from town to town with the Reed Foundation for Human Dignity. Hospitals, schools, auditoriums, wherever people need to remember what respect feels like. Every time I stand on a stage, I tell them the same story, about a man who rose from his wheelchair and reminded a room full of strangers what humanity looks like. Not for revenge, not for fame, but to say one simple truth: never look down on someone just because they sit lower than you. People listen. Some cry, some stand. And when they do, I see Maggie again, smiling from somewhere just beyond the light. "You kept your promise, John," she whispers, and for the first time in years, I finally believe her. Volume B. Question for the audience. If you had the chance to test the love of someone you trust, using your own pride, your own pain, would you dare? 1. Dare to try, even if it means losing everything. 2. Stay silent, because you're afraid of what you'll discover. Or 3. Trust completely, and let time reveal who's real when everything else disappears. I chose the first, because sometimes the only way to protect your heart is to let it break and see who helps you rebuild it.